Welcome to my channel Deep Sleep Mission-DSM. As we begin, I would be delighted if you could share your location in the comments below. It's truly inspiring to witness how far this content travels and to connect with viewers from across the world. They say Chicago's skyline is one of the most beautiful in America. Willis Tower piercing the clouds, the John Hancock Center standing like a dark sentinel, all those glass and steel giants reaching toward heaven. But I'm here to tell you something that might change how you see those towers forever. Because last week, I discovered what lives in the spaces between them. And now I can't stop looking up, even though I know I shouldn't. Before I tell you what happened, let me ask you this. Have you noticed how people in big cities never really look up? Sure, tourists crane their necks at the architecture, snap their photos. But locals? We keep our eyes at street level. Maybe it's instinct, maybe, just maybe, some part of us knows better. All right, the story's about to begin now. Get comfortable, but not too comfortable. And whatever you do, try not to look out your window while you're listening. Trust me on this one. My name's Marcus, and I've been a window washer in Chicago for 12 years. Started right out of high school, good union job, benefits, the whole American dream package. My mom was proud. My son works on the tallest buildings in the city. She'd tell anyone who'd listen at her church potlucks. The thing about my job is you see the city from angles nobody else does. Suspended 30, 40, sometimes 60 stories up, just you and the glass and the wind. You learn to read the weather like a sailor reads the sea. You know which buildings create wind tunnels, which ones have that weird pressure that makes your ears pop. And you notice things that people inside those climate-controlled offices never see. It started 3 weeks ago, middle of October. I was working the Aon Center. Beautiful day. One of those crisp autumn mornings where Lake Michigan looks like hammered copper. My partner Eddie called in sick, so I was running solo. Not ideal, but manageable. I was on the 42nd floor, western face, when I saw it. Or didn't see it. That's the thing that's hard to explain. You know how sometimes you catch movement in your peripheral vision, but when you turn, nothing's there? It was like that, except between the Aon Center and the building across the street, there's maybe 100 feet of open air, just empty space, sky, maybe some pigeons if you're unlucky. But that morning, the space looked wrong, like when you're looking at one of those magic eye pictures and your focus shifts, and suddenly you see the hidden image? The air between the buildings was doing something like that. I stopped working, just hung there in my harness. Squeegee dripping suds down the glass, staring at nothing, at the space between, and I swear something was staring back. The radio crackled. "Marcus, you good up there?" It was Tom from ground control. I must have been frozen for longer than I thought. Yeah, I'm good. Just thought I saw something. Drone, maybe? Been having problems with those idiots flying them around the towers. Maybe, I said. But we both knew drones didn't explain the feeling crawling up my spine like cold fingers. I finished that section fast. Didn't look at the gap again. But all day, even when I was facing the building, I felt it. That presence in the empty air, watching. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I Googled Chicago unexplained phenomena. You'd be surprised what comes up. Or maybe you wouldn't. Every city has its ghosts, its mysteries. But what caught my eye was a forum post from 2018. Username Skywatcher312 wrote, "Anyone else notice the spaces between downtown buildings feel weird? Like something's there, but not there, especially around Aon/Prudential area. Started noticing after working construction on high-rises. Can't explain it better than that." The thread had 3 replies, 2 calling him crazy, 1 One just said, "Don't look up, don't acknowledge it. It gets stronger when you do." I laughed, actually laughed out loud in my empty apartment. Some conspiracy nut trying to spook people, but that night, I dreamed about the gap. About something massive and impossible pressed into the narrow spaces between Chicago's towers, breathing, waiting, watching through dimensions we weren't meant to perceive. I woke up at 3 a.m., sheets soaked with sweat, and for just a moment, through my bedroom window, I swear I saw the darkness between two apartment buildings across the street ripple. The next morning, Eddie was back. Thank God. I needed normal. I needed someone else there to tell me I was being ridiculous. We were assigned to the Prudential building. The older one, not Prudential 2. Classic Chicago architecture. Built in the 50s when they still put gargoyles and decorative elements on skyscrapers. "You look rough," Eddie said as we suited up. "Didn't sleep great." "Yeah? What's eating you?" I almost told him, almost, but how do you explain that you're afraid of empty air? So I just shrugged. We started on the east face, Lake Michigan spreading out below us like a promise of escape. The work was routine, meditative even. Spray, squeegee, wipe, move down. The rhythm of it usually calms me. But every time we shifted position, every time the angle changed, I found myself looking at the gaps. They were everywhere once you started noticing. Narrow alleys 40 stories up. Spaces between buildings that seemed too dark for the bright October sun. And in every one, that sense of something watching. Not malevolent exactly, but not benign either. Curious, maybe. The way a cat watches a mouse before it decides whether it's hungry. "Marcus!" I jerked. Eddie was staring at me, concern creasing his weathered face. "You almost stepped off the platform, man. Where's your head?" I looked down. My right foot was halfway off the edge. Nothing below but a 40-story drop. I hadn't even realized I'd been moving, leaning, trying to get a better look at the space between our building and the next. "I need a break," I said. We rode the platform down to the 20th floor, where there was a maintenance balcony. Eddie produced a thermos of coffee, poured us both cups. The October wind cut through our coveralls, but the coffee was hot and bitter and real. "Talk to me," Eddie said. 12 years we've been partners. I know when something's wrong, so I told him, not everything, not the dreams or the forum post, but about seeing something in the gaps, about the feeling of being watched. Eddie listened. Didn't interrupt. Didn't laugh. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "My grandfather worked construction," he finally said. "Built half the skyline in the 60s and 70s. He used to tell me stories. Thought he was just trying to scare me. Said there were rules for working up high. Rules nobody talked about but everybody knew." He took another sip of coffee, eyes focused on something beyond the lake. "Don't whistle between buildings. It calls them. Don't look directly at the gaps for more than 3 seconds. They notice. And never, never acknowledge what you might see there. Because once they know you can see them, they get interested." "They?" I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. Eddie shrugged. Never said what they were. Just said Chicago's always been a door. The Great Fire didn't start it, but it opened things wider. All that death, all that fear. It changed the geometry of the city somehow, made spaces that shouldn't exist. You believe that? He finished his coffee, stood up, stretched. "I believe my grandfather worked these buildings for 40 years and died peacefully in his bed at 91. And he followed those rules every single day. We went back to work. I tried to follow the rules, I really did. Quick glances only, no staring, no acknowledging. But it was like trying not to think about pink elephants. The more I tried not to look, the more my eyes were drawn to those spaces. And I started noticing something else. Other people were looking too. Not everyone, but some. A businessman on his smoke break, gazing too long at the gap between his building and the next. A woman in an office, her desk facing the window, her eyes unfocused on the middle distance. A maintenance worker on another building, frozen in place, staring at nothing or not nothing at the same thing I was seeing, the thing that lived in the spaces between. That afternoon, around 3 o'clock, something happened. We were working the 35th floor, Eddie on the left side of the platform, me on the right. The sun had gone behind clouds, and the city took on that gray October cast that makes everything look like an old photograph. I was wiping down a window when I saw the reflection. In the glass, clear as day, something dark stretched between our building and the Willis Tower 3 blocks away. Not a shape exactly, more like an absence of shape. Like someone had torn a hole in reality and something was pressing through from the other side, trying to squeeze itself into our dimension through the gaps in the city. I must have made a sound because Eddie grabbed my arm. "Don't look," he said, voice tight. "Just work, just clean the glass." But in the reflection, I saw it turn, whatever it was. It turned toward us, and I understood with horrible clarity that it could see me too. See me seeing it. The glass in front of me began to fog, like something was breathing on it from the inside. "Close your eyes," Eddie commanded. Now, I did. Stood there on a platform 35 stories up, eyes squeezed shut, feeling that presence examining me through dimensions I couldn't understand. The platform creaked, the wind stopped. For a moment, everything stopped. Then Eddie started whistling, loud and cheerful. "Take me out to the ball game." The most normal, human sound imaginable. He grabbed my squeegee, started working my section, whistling like nothing was wrong. And slowly, like water draining from a sink, I felt the presence recede. When I opened my eyes, the reflection showed only clouds and buildings. Normal, safe. But my hands were shaking so bad I couldn't hold my tools. "We're done for today," Eddie announced, already guiding the platform down. In the van, heading back to the depot, he finally spoke. "It's getting stronger." Grandfather said it would. Said every year, more people, more buildings, more spaces for it to grow into. Said one day it would be strong enough to. He trailed off. To what? To step through. To stop hiding in the gaps and actually enter our world. I wanted to laugh. Wanted to tell him he was crazy. But I could still feel the memory of that breathing on the glass. Still feel those impossible eyes examining me. "What do we do?" I asked. Eddie was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, just as we pulled into the depot, "We follow the rules. We don't feed it attention, and we hope somebody else figures out how to stop it before it's too late." I called in sick the next 3 days. Told myself I had the flu. Told myself I needed rest. But really, I was scared. Scared to go back up there. Scared to be that close to the gaps. But staying home was almost worse. My apartment is on the 12th floor of a converted loft building in the West Loop. Not high by Chicago standards, but high enough. High enough to see the spaces between buildings. High enough to notice how the darkness gathered there even in broad daylight. I found myself obsessing, researching. The Chicago fire of 1871, sure, everyone knows about that. But did you know there were reports of strange sightings in the weeks after? People claiming to see figures in the smoke that didn't disperse. Shadows moving through the ruins without bodies to cast them. The Tribune dismissed them as trauma. Hallucinations brought on by grief and loss. But what if I found other things too? In 1942, 3 construction workers fell from the exact same spot on different buildings. all on the same day, all at 2:17 p.m. They were working on buildings blocks apart. The only connection? Witnesses said all three had been staring at the empty air, reaching out toward something nobody else could see. In 1987, a whole office floor at the Merchandise Mart reported seeing dark ribbons floating between buildings during a thunderstorm. 73 people. The story made the news for exactly 1 day before it vanished, like someone had scrubbed it from existence. In 2004, a photographer named Amy Chen published a series called Negative Spaces, black and white photos of Chicago's skyline. But she'd done something with the exposure that made the gaps between buildings look occupied. The photos were displayed at a gallery in River North for exactly 3 days before Amy had a breakdown, destroyed all the prints, and checked herself into a psychiatric facility. She never said what she saw in those developed images, but her assistant later said that in the last photo she developed, something in the gap had been reaching toward the camera. By the third night, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to talk to someone who might understand. I remembered the username from that forum post, Skywatcher 312. The 312 was Chicago's area code. Maybe they were still around. Maybe they had answers. It took hours of searching, but I found them. Same username on a different forum, one dedicated to urban anomalies. Their last post was 6 months ago, but their profile had an email address. I wrote a simple message. I see them too. The things in the gaps. Please, I need to know what you know. The response came within an hour. Millennium Park, Crown Fountain, midnight. Come alone. I know how that sounds. Meeting a stranger from the internet in a park at midnight? In Chicago? But I was desperate, and somehow, I knew this person was as scared as I was. You don't study something like this unless it's affected you, changed you, made you question everything you thought you knew about reality. Millennium Park at midnight is its own kind of eerie. During the day, it's packed with tourists taking selfies with Cloudgate, kids splashing in Crown Fountain. But at night, it's mostly empty, just the occasional jogger, maybe a security guard making rounds. The fountain was off for the season, the 2 towers that usually project faces standing dark like monoliths. I saw her before she saw me, a woman, maybe 40, Asian features, sitting on a bench facing the towers. She had a camera in her lap, one of those old film ones. As I approached, she looked up, and I saw the same haunted expression I'd been seeing in my own mirror. "You're the window washer," she said, not a question. "How did you—" "There's only a handful of us who can see them." "Really see them. We tend to hear about each other." She gestured for me to sit. "I'm Amy." "Amy Chen? The photographer?" She smiled, but it was bitter. "Former photographer. Haven't touched a camera since I saw one looking back through the lens." We sat in silence for a moment. The city hummed around us, alive even at midnight. Finally, I asked the question that had been burning in me for days. "What are they?" Amy was quiet so long I thought she wouldn't answer. Then, "Nobody knows for sure. But I have a theory. You know how physicists talk about dark matter? The stuff that makes up most of the universe, but we can't see or detect it directly?" I nodded. "What if it's not matter at all? What if it's something alive? Something that exists in the spaces we can't perceive? And what if, in certain places, under certain conditions, the barrier gets thin? Why Chicago? Why any big city? Millions of people. All that psychic energy, all that fear and hope and desperation packed into a few square miles. It creates pressure, weakens the boundaries. And Chicago's special. The fire created a wound that never quite healed. The city rebuilt on top of ashes and bones. Every building is a tombstone. Every gap is a grave." She lifted her camera, aimed it at the space between the two fountain towers, but didn't shoot. I've been documenting them for 15 years, never developing the film, just recording, trying to understand the pattern. They're getting bolder. Used to be you'd only catch glimpses, shadows in shadows. Now, she lowered the camera. Now they're practically reaching through. Eddie, my partner, his grandfather said they might step through, actually enter our world. Amy laughed, but there was no humor in it. Enter? Oh, honey, they're already here. They've always been here. We just couldn't see them before, but something's changing. The city's growing, building higher, creating more gaps, and we're evolving too. More people can see them every year, and the more who see, the stronger they get, I finished. Exactly. A wind kicked up, rustling the trees around the park. For a moment, just a moment, I could have sworn I saw something move between the fountain towers. Something that had too many angles, or not enough. Is there a way to stop them? I asked. Amy stood, shouldered her camera bag. If there is, I haven't found it. All we can do is follow the rules. Don't look too long. Don't acknowledge them directly. And never, ever try to photograph them with a digital camera. Why not digital? She paused, looked back at me. Because digital captures things exactly as they are. Film still has that margin of error, that humanity. Digital shows you the truth, and the truth, she shuddered. The truth is they're not between the buildings. They are the spaces between, and they're hungry. She walked away, leaving me alone in the park. I sat there until dawn, watching the city wake up, watching the gaps fill with morning light that didn't quite reach all the way through. I went back to work the next day. What else could I do? Quit? Move? Where would I go that didn't have buildings, didn't have gaps, didn't have spaces for them to inhabit? Eddie didn't say anything when I showed up. Just nodded, handed me my gear. We were on the Willis Tower, the big one. 110 stories of black steel and glass reaching toward heaven. Or maybe, I thought, as we rode the elevator up, reaching toward something else entirely. We started at the top. Floor 100. The city spread out below us like a circuit board, all lines and lights and patterns. From up here, you could see how the buildings formed corridors, channels, a vast network of gaps and spaces, like veins or a web. You met someone, Eddie said as we worked. Not a question. How did you know? You've got that look, like you've learned something you wish you hadn't. I told him about Amy, about what she'd said. Eddie listened, working steadily, never missing a stroke with his squeegee. My grandfather, he said finally. He left journals. I never told anyone, not even my wife, but he wrote about them, called them the Dwellers, said they'd always been here since before the city, since before humans, maybe. We just built into their space, built our towers right through their territory. What did he think they wanted? Eddie paused, looked out at the city. To be seen, to be acknowledged. They feed on observation, on consciousness recognizing them. Every person who sees them, who truly sees them, makes them a little more real, a little more solid. Then we should stop looking. Tell everyone to stop looking. Too late for that. How many people you think work in these towers? Look out these windows every day. Even if only 1% can see them, that's thousands of people. Thousands of observers, thousands of meals. We worked in silence for a while. Floor 98, 97. The sun climbing higher, casting shadows that fell in strange angles between the buildings. And that's when I noticed something. The shadows. They didn't match. The sun was in the east, so shadows should fall west. But some of the shadows between buildings, they fell north, or south, or, impossibly, up. "Eddie," I started. "I see it," he said quietly. The shadows were moving, independently of the sun, independently of the buildings. They were reaching, stretching, connecting, building by building, gap by gap, creating a network of darkness across the city. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Just an address. I showed it to Eddie. "That's Amy's building," I said. "How did you—" But Eddie was already guiding the platform down. "We need to go." Now. The address led to a vintage apartment building in Lincoln Park. 20 stories, red brick, built in the 1920s. Amy lived on the top floor. The doorman was gone. The lobby empty. The elevator climbed slowly, cables creaking. With each floor, I felt the pressure building. That same feeling from the gaps, but concentrated, focused. Amy's door was open. The apartment was wrong. The angles didn't match. Corners that should have been 90 degrees were acute, or obtuse. The ceiling seemed both too high and too low. And every window, every single window, faced a gap between buildings. We found Amy in her dark room, red light still on, photos hanging from clotheslines, hundreds of them, all developed, all showing the same thing from different angles, different times, different gaps. The dwellers. In the photos, they were clear, not shadows or absences, but things, massive, ancient, impossible geometries folded into spaces too small to contain them. They had eyes, or what might have been eyes. Thousands of them, all looking at the camera, all looking at us. Amy was sitting in the corner, camera still in her hands, staring at the largest photo. In it, a dweller was reaching through. Actually through. One massive appendage extended from the gap into... "It's in the room," Amy whispered. I finally got the shot. The perfect shot. The one that shows the truth. I looked closer at the photo. The appendage wasn't reaching into some random room. It was reaching into the dark room. Into the room we were standing in. Right now, I turned slowly. In the corner, where the walls met the ceiling, the shadows were wrong. They had depth, substance, and in that depth, something stirred. "Don't look," Eddie commanded. But it was too late. I saw it, not a glimpse, not a reflection, but the thing itself. It had always been there, in every gap, in every space, waiting. We hadn't been seeing multiple creatures, we'd been seeing parts of one vast entity, threaded through the city like a cancer through tissue. Every building in Chicago was just an obstacle it had learned to grow around. And now, after decades of being observed, of feeding on our recognition, it was strong enough to push through. The wall began to bulge. Paint cracked. Plaster fell. Something that looked like flesh but moved like liquid began to emerge. "Run," Eddie said. We ran. Down the hallway that stretched longer than it should have. Into the stairwell that had too many steps between floors. Behind us, the sound of walls breaking, reality tearing. Something vast and patient finally claiming the space it had always occupied. We burst onto the street. Around us, people walked by oblivious, checking their phones, chatting about lunch, normal, human, blind to the thing birthing itself from the gaps between their city. "What do we do?" I gasped. Eddie looked up, all around us. In every gap, darkness writhed, waiting, watching, ready. "We warn them," he said. "We break the rules, tell everyone, make them see, make them understand. But if observation makes it stronger, then maybe, if enough people see it, really see it, It becomes real enough to fight, real enough to kill, or real enough to kill us all. That was a week ago. I'm still washing windows, still riding the platforms up into the sky. But now I do something else too. I leave messages, tiny words written in the condensation on the glass. Look at the gaps. See what's watching. Don't ignore the spaces. Most people don't notice, but some do. I see them pause, look out, look at the spaces between. Their eyes widening as they finally see what's always been there. Eddie thinks we're doing the right thing. Amy, I don't know what happened to Amy. Her apartment is empty now. Condemned. They say the structure is unsound, that the walls just gave way. But I know better. The dwellers are still there, stronger every day, more visible, more real. Sometimes I wonder if we're helping or hastening our doom. But what choice do we have? Ignore them and let them grow in darkness? Or drag them into the light and hope humanity can face what it's been building into all along? I don't have answers, only questions. And one piece of advice: next time you're in a city, any city, look up. Look at the spaces between the buildings. Look at the gaps where the sky should be. And if you see something looking back, if you see the darkness move, you have to make a choice. Keep walking and pretend you saw nothing. Or stop, stare, and help us make it real enough to fight. The choice is yours. But remember, once you see them, they see you too. And they never, ever forget a face. Sweet dreams. If you can still sleep after this. And hey, if you're still listening, if this story kept you up, made you think, made you look at your city differently, leave a comment. Tell me what you see in the gaps where you live. Because I have a feeling Chicago isn't the only door they're pushing through. I have a feeling they're everywhere now, waiting in every city, every space, every gap between what is and what shouldn't be. And they're getting hungrier. Story number 2. The cardboard box shouldn't have been there. I'd cleared out my parents' attic in Stillwater, Ohio, 3 times since they passed. 3 times. Every dusty corner cataloged. Every forgotten Christmas decoration sorted. Every yellowed photograph filed away. So when I spotted that water-stained banker's box tucked behind the chimney brick, my skin prickled with something I couldn't name. Not fear. Not yet. The label, written in my mother's careful cursive, read, Madison High School, Class of 2026. My breath caught. I graduated in 2024. Before you call me crazy, before you click away thinking this is just another creepypasta, I need you to understand something. I'm holding the yearbook right now. I can feel its weight. The glossy cover reflects my face back at me, distorted and wrong. And every single person in these photos, every single one, is someone I know. Was someone I knew. Some of them are already dead. Now the story begins. The attic smelled like mothballs and forgotten summers. October rain drummed against the roof as I dragged the box into better light. My phone flashlight caught the dust motes dancing. No, not dancing, fleeing. Like they knew something I didn't. Inside the box, wrapped in plastic that crinkled like old skin, was a yearbook. Madison High School's crest gleamed on the cover. That same stupid eagle clutching a scroll I'd stared at for 4 years. But the date. Class of 2026. Tomorrow's leaders, yesterday's dreams. My hands trembled as I opened it. The binding cracked. Fresh, new, like it had just been printed. The first page stopped my heart. There I was, senior portrait. But older. The laugh lines around my eyes deeper, a scar on my left temple I didn't have. My smile looked tired. Beneath the photo, Jake Morrison, most likely to remember. Remember what? I flipped through frantically. Sarah Chen, my lab partner who'd died in a car accident last year. There she was, alive, graduated. Her quote, "The future isn't what it used to be." Tommy Rodriguez, who'd moved to California in junior year, never came back. His photo showed him in our senior class. His eyes looked hollow, dead, even though he was smiling. Every page revealed impossibilities. Kids who'd dropped out were honor students. The quiet ones were team captains. And the dates, God, the dates were all wrong. Homecoming 2025, prom 2026. The senior trip to Washington, D.C. that we never took because of budget cuts, there were 40 pages of photos from it. In every photo, something was off. A shadow where there shouldn't be one. A face blurred just enough to make you look twice. And in the background of every group shot, always in the corner, always just out of focus, a figure in a Madison High Letterman jacket. But the jacket was inside out, the red and gold reversed, like a photo negative made flesh. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. The text was just 3 words. Check page 73. My finger found the page before my brain could stop it. The heading read, "In Memoriam, those we lost along the way." 27 names. 27 photos with black borders. I knew 3 of them. They were still alive. I'd seen Marcus at Walmart yesterday. Jennifer posted on Instagram this morning. And David was supposed to come help me clean out this attic tomorrow. The last photo made me drop the book. It was me. The caption read, "Jacob Morrison, October 15th, 2025. You were remembered." October 15th, today was October 15th, but it was 2024. Wasn't it? I didn't sleep. Couldn't. The yearbook lay on my kitchen table like a dead thing, pages fluttering occasionally though no windows were open. Every time I walked past, it seemed to have moved. Just an inch. Just enough to notice. By 3 a.m., I'd found 17 inconsistencies in my own memory. The coffee shop on Main Street. When did it close? I remembered getting lattes there with Emma just last month. But Google said it had been demolished in 2019. The photos on my phone from that day showed us at a Starbucks I'd never been to. My diploma, hanging on the wall, said Class of 2024. But when I looked closer, really looked, the ink seemed fresh. Too fresh. And there was a watermark I'd never noticed before. Hold it to the light just right and you could see it. 2026. I called David. It rang once before going to that 3-tone sound. The number you have dialed has been disconnected or is no longer in service. But he'd texted me yesterday, hadn't he? I pulled up our conversation. The last message was from 3 months ago. Everything after that was gone, like it had never existed. The yearbook fell open on its own. Page 116. Spring musical, Our Town. I was in that photo. Center stage. Wearing a costume I didn't recognize, standing next to Ashley Park who'd played Emily. But Ashley had moved freshman year. And I'd never done theater. I was terrified of public speaking, always had been. Yet, there I was. Smiling, confident, and in the wings, barely visible in the stage light's glare, that figure again. The inside-out jacket. This time I could almost make out a face. It looked like me, but wrong. Like someone had tried to draw me from memory and gotten the proportions just slightly off. My laptop chimed. An email from Madison High School. Dear alumni, we're updating our records for the class of 2026 reunion. Please confirm your current status. There was a link. 1 click. That's all it would take. My cursor hovered over it. The screen flickered. For just a second I saw my reflection, but older. That scar on my temple. Those tired eyes. I clicked. The page loaded. A simple form. Name. Graduation year. Current status. The drop-down menu for current status had 3 options: living, deceased, pending. I was already listed as pending. The deadline to update was October 16th, 2025, tomorrow, or next year. I couldn't tell anymore. My phone rang. The caller ID showed my own number. I answered, static, then breathing. Then my own voice, but older. Tired, scared. Don't look at page 204. Whatever you do, don't look at page 204. The line went dead. The yearbook's pages started turning on their own. Fast, faster, like invisible hands were searching for something. They stopped. Page 204. Before I tell you about page 204, I need to tell you about the fragments. The pieces of memory that started falling back into place once I stopped fighting them. I remember now. The night I found the yearbook wasn't the first time I'd been in that attic. I'd been there before, multiple times. Sometimes I'd find the box, sometimes I wouldn't. Sometimes the yearbook was already open to page 204 when I lifted the lid. But I always forgot. Until now. The first time was in March. I'd gone up to look for my father's old fishing gear and found myself staring at a page I didn't remember. Page 184, Clubs and Organizations. There I was, president of the debate club. A club that didn't exist when I was in school. In the photo, I was holding a trophy, standing next to Mrs. Henderson, our English teacher who'd died my sophomore year. The timestamp on my phone showed I'd been in the attic for 4 hours, but I only remembered 10 minutes. The second time was in June. I'd gone up to check for leaks after a storm and found the yearbook open to page 67, Academic Achievements. My name was on the National Merit Scholars list. I'd never qualified. Hell, I'd never even taken the PSAT, but there was my certificate, photographed in perfect clarity. That time, I lost 7 hours. When I came downstairs, dinner was burning on the stove. I didn't remember starting to cook. The third time was in August. Page 142, Senior Sports. I was captain of the cross-country team. I hated running, still do. But in the photo, I was crossing a finish line. Arms raised in victory, face split by a grin I'd never worn. 12 hours that time. I woke up in my car in the high school parking lot at 3 a.m., still in my pajamas. The security guard found me and drove me home. I told him I'd been sleepwalking. He believed me because the alternative was too strange to consider. Each time, the yearbook got heavier, more real, and each time I forgot a little more of the person I used to be. But fragments remain, splinters of the life I actually lived. They cut me when I try to hold them too tightly, but they're all I have left of Jake Morrison, class of 2024. Part 2.75. The other victims I started researching. Madison High's website had a memorial page for deceased alumni. The list was wrong. People who should have been there weren't. People who shouldn't have been there were. But the comments, God, the comments. Ashley_P_2026. Still can't believe Jake's gone. He was supposed to help with the 10-year reunion planning. See you on the other side, buddy. Posted 3 days ago. Ashley Park, who moved away freshman year, who was commenting on my death from a graduation that hadn't happened yet. Tommy, our cross-country. Jake and I were going to visit California together after graduation. He promised. Guess some promises can't be kept. Tommy Rodriguez, cross-country team. We'd been friends, but not close. And I'd never promised to visit him anywhere. Sarah C_science nerd. Lab partners for life, remember? Even now, especially now, the experiments we could have done together. Rest in peace, Jake. See you in 2026. Sarah Chen. Dead for over a year. Commenting on my memorial page. Talking about experiments we'd never done. I found more, dozens of them. All from the class of 2026. all talking about memories that weren't mine, friendships that had never existed, a version of me that had lived through experiences I'd never had, and they were all planning to attend the reunion. The Madison High website had a countdown timer. Class of 2026 10-year reunion, October 16th, 2025, 47 days remaining. But that would make it a 1-year reunion, not 10-year. Unless time worked differently for them, unless they'd been living in that school, experiencing years that never were, accumulating memories of a future that only existed in the margins of reality. I checked the alumni directory. Every single member of the class of 2026 was listed as status unknown, except for 3 people. Jake Morrison, deceased, October 15th, 2025. Redacted, status, pending. Redacted, status pending. The redacted names flickered when I tried to read them. Like my computer was trying to show me something it wasn't allowed to display. Page 204 was the senior class panoramic photo, every graduating student standing on the bleachers, a moment frozen in time that never happened. I found myself immediately, 3rd row, 5th from the left, but I wasn't looking at the camera. None of us in that row were. We were all turned, staring at something outside the frame. Our faces. God, our faces were terrified. The photo was taken at night. Why would they take a class photo at night? The stadium lights created harsh shadows, and in those shadows, things moved. Even in a still photo they moved. Shapes that weren't quite human. Too many joints, too many angles. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the date stamped in the corner. October 16th, 2025, 1:17 a.m. tomorrow. The photo that couldn't exist was taken tomorrow. I grabbed my keys. I had to get to the school. Had to prove this was some elaborate prank. Madison High was only 10 minutes away. I'd drive there, see the normal, empty building, and laugh about this tomorrow. The streets were wrong. Not obviously. Not at first. But the Dairy Queen that should have been on Oak Street was a dentist's office. The park where I'd learned to ride a bike was a parking lot. And the road to school, the road I'd driven 1,000 times, led to a dead end. Number, not a dead end. A fence. Chain link, 12 feet high, topped with razor wire. Signs every few yards. Demolition zone, no trespassing. Madison High School Memorial Site. Memorial Site? I parked, climbed the fence despite every instinct screaming not to. Dropped into tall grass that grabbed at my ankles like desperate fingers. The school was there, but not. The building stood but hollow, windows black, empty. Like something had sucked the life out of it and left only the shell. My phone vibrated. A photo message from an unknown number. It was me, standing exactly where I stood now, taking the same photo I was about to take. The timestamp said October 16th, 2025, 1:03 a.m. Another message, "You're early." The school's doors opened, all of them, at once. The sound echoed across the empty lot like a death rattle. Inside, fluorescent lights flickered to life. Not all of them, just enough to create a path, leading to the gym. I shouldn't have followed the lights. Every horror movie I'd ever seen told me not to follow the lights. But my feet moved anyway, like they remembered a path I'd never walked. The hallways were covered in photos, thousands of them, all from the yearbook, but wrong. In some, people had too many eyes. In others, their smiles were too wide, showing too many teeth. And in every single one, that figure in the inside-out jacket got closer to the camera, clearer. It was me, a version of me that had stayed, that had graduated in 2026, the gym doors were open. Inside, chairs were arranged on the basketball court. hundreds of them, all facing a small stage with a single podium. On every chair was a name card. I found mine in the third row. Jacob Morrison, class of 2026. The lights went out. When they came back on, every chair was full. Part 3.5, the classroom. But first, before the gym, before the confrontation, I need to tell you about the classroom. Room 237, Mrs. Henderson's old English class. The door was open, and the lights were on, and I could hear talking. Normal conversation. The kind you'd hear in any high school anywhere. I looked inside. 26 students sat at desks arranged in perfect rows. All of them from the class of 2026. All of them exactly as they appeared in their yearbook photos. They didn't look up when I entered. They were all writing, taking a test. At the front of the room, Mrs. Henderson graded papers. She looked exactly as she had before the cancer took her, before the chemo made her hair fall out, before the morphine made her forget our names. "Mr. Morrison," she said without looking up, "you're late. Again." I wanted to run, should have run, but my legs carried me to an empty desk in the back row. My name was carved into the wood. J. Morrison, class of 2026. A test paper appeared on my desk. The header read, "Final Examination, the Nature of Reality." The first question made my hand shake. If a person graduates in 2024 but stays behind until 2026, which year is more real? Show your work. I looked around. Everyone was writing. Their pencils moved in perfect synchronization. Scratch, 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 like insects crawling across paper. "Mr. Morrison," Mrs. Henderson's voice cut through my panic. "You need to finish." There isn't much time left. I looked down. My hand was already moving. Writing answers I didn't understand to questions that shouldn't exist. The words appeared on the paper as if someone else was controlling my arm. The year that feels most real is the year you can't leave. 2024 was a dream. 2025 is a nightmare. 2026 is coming home. The bell rang. Everyone stood up at once. They turned to look at me, and their faces were wrong. Too many teeth. Eyes that reflected light like mirrors. "See you at graduation, Jake," Sarah Chen said. Her voice came from somewhere behind her face. "Don't be late next time," Tommy Rodriguez added. "Mrs. Henderson hates it when we're late." They filed out in perfect silence. Mrs. Henderson collected the papers. "You did well today, Jacob," she said. "Much better than usual. I think you're finally starting to understand." "Understand what?" She smiled. The first genuine smile I'd seen since entering this place. That some people are meant to graduate, and some people are meant to stay. The classroom door slammed shut behind me. I was back in the hallway, alone. The photos on the walls had changed again. Now they showed me in every frame. Jake Morrison, class of 2026, student council president, valedictorian, prom king, a life I'd never lived, achievements I'd never earned, memories that belonged to someone else. But they felt real, more real than anything I'd experienced in years. They looked like people, at first glance. Sarah Chen sat 2 seats over, her head turned at an angle that wasn't quite right. Tommy Rodriguez was in the front row, his fingers drumming on his knee in a rhythm that hurt to hear. Marcus, Jennifer, David, all of them were there, all the people from the In Memoriam page, and they were all staring at me. "You're early," Sarah said. Her voice came from the wrong part of her throat. "The reunion isn't until tomorrow." "What reunion?" My voice cracked. "What is this?" "The class of 2026 reunion," Tommy answered, still drumming those fingers. "Don't you remember? We voted on it. October 16th, 2025. Everyone comes back. But I graduated in 2024. They laughed, all of them. In perfect unison, a sound like breaking glass. No, David stood up. His shadow fell the wrong way. You tried to leave in 2024, but nobody leaves Madison High, not really. Part of you always stays behind. The figure in the inside-out jacket walked onto the stage. Up close, I could see it clearly. It was me, exactly me, but its eyes were ancient, tired, like it had been waiting forever. Every choice creates a branch, it said with my voice. You chose to graduate early, to leave. But the you that stayed, I had to finish, had to live through 2025 and 2026, had to watch everyone else leave while I remained. That's impossible. Is it? The other me smiled. That tired, knowing smile from the yearbook. Check your phone. Check the date. October 15th, 2025. No, that couldn't be right. But my photos, my recent photos, they were all dated 2025. My texts, my emails, everything. You've been living in 2025 for months, the other me continued. You just didn't want to see it. But tonight the timelines converge. The you that left and the you that stayed. One of us gets to go forward, the other. It gestured to the seated figures. The others stay here. Forever, attending eternal reunions, remembering what could have been. Why? I gasped. Why is this happening? Because Madison High doesn't let go, Sarah whispered. It needs us, feeds on us, our potential, our dreams, our futures, and when we try to leave, it keeps a piece. That piece grows, becomes real, and eventually, it comes to collect. The lights flickered. When they steadied, everyone was standing, moving closer, their faces shifting between familiar and wrong. Choose, the other me said. Stay and become what you were meant to be. Or run and let me take your place in the real world. I ran through the doors, down the hallways where photos fell like autumn leaves, out into the night where the fence had disappeared. My car started on the first try. I drove without looking back, but at every red light I saw them in the reflection. Following, waiting. I made it home as the clock struck midnight. October 16th, 2025. The yearbook was still on my kitchen table. But it had changed. The in memoriam page was different. 26 names now. Marcus, Jennifer, David. They weren't there anymore. But a new name had appeared. A fresh entry, the ink still wet. Jacob Morrison, 2026. October 16th, 2025. He chose to run. Below it, a note in handwriting I recognized as my own. See you at the next reunion. That was 3 months ago. Today is January 15th, 2026. Or maybe it's January 15th, 2025. I can't tell anymore. The dates on everything keep changing when I'm not looking directly at them. The yearbook is still here. It's gotten thicker. New pages appear every few days. Photos of events I don't remember attending. Awards ceremonies where my name is called. Graduation parties where I smile and laugh and look happy. The other Jake, the one who stayed, he's been busy, living the life I abandoned. And sometimes, late at night, I can feel him, like a weight pressing against the back of my skull. He wants his body back, his timeline, his reality. I've tried throwing the yearbook away, burning it, burying it in the backyard. It always comes back, usually sitting on my kitchen table, open to a new page, showing me what I'm missing. Last week, it was page 298, college acceptance letters. Apparently, the other Jake got into Harvard. Full scholarship, pre-med. I never even applied to Harvard. But there's the letter, photographed in perfect detail. dated May 15th, 2026. A future that's rushing toward me whether I want it or not. The phone calls have started again too. Not from my own number this time. From numbers I recognize. My old friends. My ex-girlfriend Emma. My dead parents. They all say the same thing. When are you coming back to us, Jake? We miss you. We're waiting. Emma called yesterday. She sounded exactly like she did in high school. Young, happy, alive with possibility. I got your letter, she said, the one about prom. Of course I'll go with you. I've been waiting for you to ask. What letter? Emma, what are you talking about? The letter from 2026, silly. Don't you remember? We're supposed to be together. The yearbook says so. I hung up, checked page 167. Prom night, 2026. There I was, dancing with Emma in the gymnasium. We both looked perfect. Like we'd never aged, like we'd been preserved in amber at 17 forever. But Emma died 2 years ago. Car accident on I-70. I went to her funeral. I saw them lower the casket, didn't I? I've been trying to research Madison High. The real Madison High. The one I actually attended from 2020 to 2024. But every record I find tells a different story. According to the internet, Madison High School was demolished in 2023. A gas leak explosion. 17 students died. The school was declared a memorial site and never rebuilt. But I attended classes there in 2024. I graduated there. I have photos on my phone from the ceremony. Don't I? I checked. The photos are there, but they're different. Instead of the familiar red brick building, the graduation ceremony is taking place in what looks like a makeshift outdoor venue. Folding chairs on a grass field. A banner stretched between 2 trees. Madison High School Temporary Campus, Class of 2024. I don't remember it being temporary. I remember the building being fine. Old, sure, but solid. Permanent. Unless... I pulled up the news archives. March 15th, 2023. Gas explosion destroys Madison High School. The article included a list of victims. 17 names I recognized. 17 classmates who should have graduated with me. Sarah Chen wasn't on the list. She died in a car accident. But according to this article, she was one of the 17 who died in the explosion. Tommy Rodriguez wasn't on the list either. He'd moved to California, but his name was there. Victim number 12, Marcus Webb, Jennifer Liu, David Park. All of them. All the people I thought were still alive. All killed in an explosion I didn't remember. But at the bottom of the article, there was a sidebar. 3 students unaccounted for. It listed 3 names. 3 students who were supposed to be in the building, but whose bodies were never found. Jacob Morrison, redacted. The same redacted names from the alumni directory. The same 3 people listed as status pending. I think I know what happened now. I think I know why the yearbook exists. Why the class of 2026 is so desperate to have their reunion. We died in that explosion. All of us. But somehow, we slipped through the cracks, landed in the space between what was and what could have been. The 3 of us, the unaccounted for, were the only ones who got out, who made it to 2024, but the others, the 17 who died, they never left the school. They're still there, living in the shadow of a timeline that should have been, graduating in 2026 instead of 2024. Growing older in a place that exists outside of time. And they want us back. They want to complete the class. They want their 18 members so they can finally, truly graduate. The reunion is tomorrow night, October 16th, 2026. The 10th anniversary of a graduation that happened in a timeline where we all lived. I know because the invitations have been arriving all week. Slipped under my door while I sleep. Left on my car windshield. appearing in my mailbox even though I haven't given anyone this address. Elegant cardstock, gold lettering. The Madison High School crest embossed at the top. The class of 2026 cordially invites you to our 10-year reunion, Madison High School Memorial Gymnasium, October 16th, 2026, 8 p.m. Black tie requested. Please RSVP. We've been waiting for you. At the bottom, in that familiar handwriting, it's time to come home, Jake. We saved you a seat. I've tried to run, bought a plane ticket to Seattle, made it as far as the airport before the ticket crumbled to dust in my hands. The boarding passes for flights that don't exist to cities that aren't there anymore. Because this isn't about geography. You can't run from a timeline. You can't escape a choice you've already made. I have two options. One, show up to the reunion. Take my place with the class of 2026. Live out the timeline where I stayed, where I graduated with my friends, where I became the person the yearbook says I'm supposed to be. Except that this version of reality is more real than the one I've been clinging to. 2. Don't show up. Let the other Jake continue living my life while I fade away like a photograph left in the sun. Become nothing more than a memory of a memory. A person who almost existed. The yearbook is open on my kitchen table. Page 347. 10-year reunion photo. Empty chairs arranged in perfect rows. A banner that reads, "Welcome home, class of 2026." And in the center of the front row, an empty space. A nameplate that says Jacob Morrison. They're waiting for me. All of them. The 17 who died. The other Jake who stayed. The versions of ourselves we could have been if that explosion had never happened. Or if it had killed all of us instead of just most of us. I can hear them sometimes, late at night, singing the school song. Madison High, our spirits soar through these halls forevermore. Voices that echo through time, calling me back to a place that exists only in the space between memory and dream. The scar on my temple, the one from the yearbook photos. It's starting to appear. Just a faint line, but getting deeper every day. The laugh lines around my eyes are etching themselves into my skin. I'm becoming the person in those photos whether I want to or not. Time is a circle. Reality is a choice, and some choices echo backward through the years, changing everything that came before. Epilogue. The reunion. I'm uploading this story because I need to know. Has anyone else found something from their future? A yearbook, a diary, a photograph? Something that shouldn't exist but does? The yearbook is still here. Every morning, there's a new page I don't remember. New photos of things that haven't happened yet. Or have they? I can't tell anymore. Last night, I got a text. Unknown number. Just a date. October 16th, 2026. Tonight's reunion. The other me is still out there, still waiting. And I think it's getting stronger. Sometimes I catch glimpses in mirrors, sometimes I hear my own voice on the phone when no one's calling. If you went to Madison High, if you graduated or tried to leave, check your attic. Check your old photos. Look for the inconsistencies, the dates that don't match, the faces that are almost right. And whatever you do, don't open your yearbook to page 204, unless you want to see yourself staring back. Unless you want to know which version of you is real. I have to go, there's someone at the door. They're knocking in a rhythm that sounds familiar. Like a song we used to sing at Madison High. A song I don't remember learning, but my hands remember the words. Tell me, which year did you really graduate? Are you sure? Are you absolutely sure? Check your diploma. Check it right now, and if the date looks wrong, even for just a second. The reunion is waiting for you too. We're all waiting. Class of 2026 forever. The knocking has stopped. I can hear footsteps walking away, But they're not leaving. They're circling the house, getting closer to the back door, to the windows, to all the ways in. I think I've made my choice. Or maybe the choice was made for me a long time ago, in a school that exploded, in a timeline that collapsed, in the space between what was and what should have been. The yearbook is glowing. Actually glowing. Like it's radioactive with possibility. Page 204 is calling to me, begging me to look one more time, to see the truth I've been running from. I think I will. I think I have to. Because some stories don't have endings. They just have reunions. See you in 2026. We'll save you a seat. Story number 3. The recordings are still on my phone. I haven't deleted them. I can't. Every night at 2:47 a.m., I wake up and stare at the ceiling, waiting, counting down those 13 minutes until it happens again. Until I hear that voice that shouldn't exist, coming from the apartment next door. But before you think I'm crazy, before you close this video thinking this is just another creepypasta, let me ask you something. Have you ever heard your pet say your name? Not a bark that sounds like words. Not your imagination playing tricks. I mean actually, clearly, unmistakably, say your name? Because 3 weeks ago, I heard my neighbor's golden retriever say mine. And it wasn't just my name, it was a warning. Alright folks, the story begins now. My name is Marcus Thompson, and I live in a pretty standard apartment complex in Burlington, Vermont. You know the type. 3 stories, beige walls, carpet that's seen better days. Nothing special, but it's home. Or at least, it was. Everything changed when Sarah moved in next door with her golden retriever, Bailey. Sweet dog, I thought at first. Big brown eyes, always wagging his tail when we passed in the hallway. Sarah seemed nice too. Mid-30s, worked as a night shift nurse at the medical center downtown. We'd exchange the usual neighborly pleasantries. Cold enough for you? How about those Patriots? That sort of thing. The walls in our building are thin, paper thin. I could hear when Sarah watched TV, when she ran her dishwasher, and when Bailey would bark. Normal dog sounds at first. The occasional whine when Sarah left for work. A few excited yips when she came home. Nothing unusual. Then, about a month ago, something shifted. It started with the dreams. I'd wake up around 3 a.m. every single night, with this feeling like someone was watching me through the wall. You know that sensation when you can just tell someone's staring at you, like a physical pressure against your skin? That's what it felt like. But from the wall, from Sarah's apartment. I'd lie there, heart pounding, listening, and I'd hear Bailey moving around. Not normal dog movements, though. It sounded deliberate. Like he was pacing, back and forth, right on the other side of my bedroom wall. One night, I pressed my ear against the wall. I know. Weird neighbor behavior. But I had to know what was making those sounds. And that's when I heard it for the first time. A whisper. Not a growl, not a whine. A whisper. Marcus! I jerked back so hard I fell off my bed, hit my elbow on the nightstand. The pain shot up my arm, but I barely noticed. Because there was no way, absolutely no way. That sound came from a dog. I told myself I was dreaming. Sleep deprivation from all these 3 a.m. wake-ups. Maybe Sarah had someone over. Maybe she was talking in her sleep. Anything but what my brain was trying to tell me. But the next night, I was ready. I downloaded a voice recorder app on my phone. One of those ones that activates when it detects sound. Set it up on my nightstand, facing the wall. If I was going crazy, at least I'd have proof. One way or the other, 2:47 a.m. My eyes snapped open, like clockwork. The pacing started immediately, soft paws on carpet, back and forth, back and forth. I held my breath, watching the recording app. The little red light blinked. It was picking something up. Then, silence. Complete, absolute silence. The kind that makes your ears ring. The kind that feels heavy, like the air itself is holding its breath. Marcus, clearer this time. Right against the wall, my name pronounced perfectly, not slurred or distorted like you'd expect from something that shouldn't be able to speak at all. Marcus, can you hear me? The recording app's levels spiked. This was real. This was happening. I wanted to respond. Every instinct screamed at me to say something. But deeper instinct, that ancient part of your brain that kept our ancestors alive, that part told me to stay absolutely still, to not make a sound. I know you're awake, Marcus. I can smell your fear through the wall. The voice was pleasant. That was the worst part. It wasn't threatening or growling. It sounded like a college professor, educated, thoughtful, coming from what I knew was a golden retriever named Bailey. She doesn't know I can do this, the voice continued. Sarah, she's at work. Won't be back until 7. We have time to talk. I grabbed my phone, hands shaking. The recording was still going. 23 seconds, 24, 25. You're recording this, aren't you? Good. You'll need proof for what's coming. My mouth was desert dry. I managed to whisper, "What's coming?" A long pause, then a sound I'll never forget. Laughter. Soft, intelligent laughter. From a dog. The others, Marcus. The others are coming, and they're not all as friendly as I am. The pacing resumed, back and forth, back and forth. Then, gradually, it stopped. I stayed awake until sunrise, playing the recording over and over. It was all there, every word crystal clear. I called in sick to work that day, spent hours researching, looking for some explanation. Voice-throwing devices, hidden speakers, elaborate pranks. But deep down, I knew none of that was right. The voice had come from exactly where Bailey was. And it knew things, like my name, like when Sarah worked, like the fact that I was recording. That evening, I saw Sarah in the hallway, returning from her shift. Bailey was with her, tail wagging, tongue lolling out in that classic golden retriever smile. "Hey, Marcus," Sarah called out, looking exhausted but friendly. "Bailey's been asking about you." I froze. What do you mean?" She laughed. "Oh, you know how dogs are." He always perks up when we pass your door. I swear, sometimes it's like he understands everything we're saying. Bailey looked at me, right at me, and I swear he winked. I didn't sleep for 3 days. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that voice, cultured, intelligent, impossibly coming from a dog. I had the recordings, 17 of them now. But who could I tell? Who would believe me? On the 4th night, exhaustion won. I passed out around 11 p.m., fully clothed, on top of my covers. The phone was recording, as always, 3 a.m. The voice woke me. "You look terrible, Marcus." I sat up, disoriented. The wall between us might as well have not existed. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Because you're the only one who can hear me." "Well, you and Mrs. Chen in 3B, but she thinks she's going senile. Keeps telling her daughter she hears the cats talking. The daughter's looking into nursing homes. The cats? They talk too? Oh, Marcus, sweet, naive Marcus. We all talk. We always have. But only a few of you can hear us, and fewer still at the right frequency. You're special." I laughed. It came out slightly hysterical. "Special? I'm losing my mind." "No. You're finally seeing what's always been there. Tell me, Marcus, have you noticed anything else strange lately? Besides me?" I had, actually. The past week, animals had been watching me. Every dog we passed on my walks would stop and stare. Cats would follow me with their eyes from windows. Even the pigeons seemed to organize themselves into patterns when I walked by. "They know you can hear," Bailey continued. "Word spreads fast in our community. How do I put this? You're like a radio that's finally tuned to our station. What do you want from me?" A long pause. When Bailey spoke again, his voice was different, urgent, worried. "There's something you need to know about Sarah. She doesn't know what she brought home. What she rescued from that shelter wasn't just me." My blood went cold. "What do you mean?" "I mean, Marcus, that something else came with me. Something that's been hiding, waiting, and it's almost strong enough to..." A door slammed. Sarah was home early. Bailey's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Tomorrow night, set up a camera, not just audio. You need to see this. You need to see what happens when she falls asleep." Then silence. I spent the next day in a hardware store, buying a small wireless camera, the kind people use for home security. I mounted it on my wall, angled toward the shared wall with Sarah's apartment. I felt like a creep, but Bailey had sounded genuinely frightened. And if I'd learned anything in the past week, it was that impossible things were apparently possible. Sarah left for her shift at 10 p.m. I watched through my peephole as she walked Bailey first, then headed out in her scrubs. Bailey had looked at my door as they passed, just for a second. A look that said, "Be ready." Midnight came and went. Then 1 a.m., 2 a.m. I was beginning to think nothing would happen when my camera alert went off. Motion detected, but not from the hallway. From inside my apartment, I looked at the feed on my phone and nearly dropped it. There was light coming through my wall. Not bright light, but a soft, pulsing glow, like bioluminescence, like something alive. And in that light, I could see through the wall as if it was made of glass. Bailey was standing in Sarah's apartment, but he wasn't alone. There was something else there. Something that hurt to look at directly. It kept shifting, like smoke given form, wrapping around Bailey, through him, above him, and then Bailey spoke, but not in the voice I'd grown used to. This voice was ancient, hollow, wrong. "Soon, very soon. The barrier weakens." Bailey's body convulsed and his normal voice broke through, struggling. "Marcus, get out! Get out of the building! It's not just me! It's in all of us! Every animal in this building is..." The thing tightened around him, cutting him off. The light pulsed brighter, and I heard sounds from all around me. From above, below, every apartment. Barking, meowing, chirping, all in unison, all saying the same thing. "We are coming through." I ran. I'm not proud of it, but I ran. Grabbed my phone, my keys, and my laptop with all the recordings backed up to the cloud, and I ran. Spent the rest of the night in my car in a 24-hour Walmart parking lot, surrounded by bright lights and people. As the sun came up, I tried to make sense of what I'd witnessed. Interdimensional parasites. Possession? Some kind of collective intelligence. Every theory sounded insane, but insane was apparently my new normal. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Marcus, it's Bailey. Using Sarah's phone. She's asleep. Please come back. I need to explain before it's too late." Against every horror movie rule, every instinct, I went back. Sarah's door was cracked open. I pushed it wider and found Bailey sitting in the living room. Sarah's phone somehow unlocked beside him. He looked up at me with those big brown eyes, and when he spoke, his mouth didn't move, but I heard him clear as day. Not through the walls this time, directly into my mind. "Thank you for coming. I don't have much time. When Sarah wakes up, I won't be able to do this anymore." "What are you?" I asked. "I'm Bailey. Just Bailey. A dog who loves his human and wants walkies and treats. But I'm also more. We all are." Every animal you've ever met has this capacity, this depth. We just can't usually bridge the gap to your world. But now you can? Something changed 3 weeks ago. When Sarah adopted me from the shelter, that shelter, it was built on something. Some place where the boundaries are thin. And when she brought me home, she brought some of that thinness with her. It's spreading, Marcus, like a virus, infecting every animal in this building, maybe beyond. The thing I saw last night, Bailey shuddered. That's what's trying to come through, using us as doorways. It's been sleeping for so long, waiting for a crack to appear. And now it has one. How do we stop it? Bailey looked at me for a long moment. You can't, but you can contain it. Keep it from spreading beyond this building. How? You need to get everyone out, every person, every animal. Evacuate the building. Then you need to make sure no one ever lives here again. Bailey, how am I supposed to do that? You have the recordings, Marcus. You have proof. Use it. Share it. Make people believe. And Marcus, when you do, don't let them take us to other homes, other buildings. We need to stay together, contained. It's the only way to keep it from spreading. Sarah, Atos, stirred in the bedroom. Bailey's eyes went wide. She's waking up. Marcus, promise me. Promise me you'll protect her. Don't let her know what I really am. Let her remember me as just her dog, her good boy who loved her. Bailey, promise me. I promise. Sarah emerged, yawning. Marcus, what are you doing here? Is everything okay? I looked at Bailey. He was just a dog again, tail wagging, happy to see us human. Yeah, Sarah, everything's fine. Bailey was just... He got out. Found him in the hallway, thought I'd bring him home. Oh, you're such a good neighbor, isn't he, Bailey? Isn't Marcus just the best? Bailey barked, a normal dog bark. But in my mind, I heard him one last time. The others are fighting it, Marcus. But we're losing. You have maybe a week. Save them. Save us all. That was 3 days ago. I've uploaded all my recordings to every platform I can find. This is my last attempt to get the word out. The building management thinks I'm crazy. The police won't listen. But maybe you will. If you live in Burlington, if you know the Riverside apartment complex on Cherry Street, stay away. And if you've noticed your pet acting strange lately, if you've heard whispers in the night, if you've seen that pulsing light, it's already too late. Bailey was wrong about one thing, though. It's not contained to our building anymore. Yesterday, I saw a woman at the grocery store and her Yorkie looked right at me and mouthed the words, "Help us." The barrier isn't just thin in one place, it's breaking down everywhere. So, I'll ask you again. Have you ever heard your pet say your name? Because if you have, if you're one of the few who can hear them, then you know what's coming, and you know we're running out of time. Recording ends. Wait, before you go, I just got another text, unknown number. It says, check your pet's eyes tonight at 3 a.m. If they're glowing, it's already inside them. Is your pet sleeping next to you right now? Are you sure they're really asleep? Sweet dreams, everyone. And whatever you do, don't let them know you can hear them too. Because once they know, they never stop talking. Final recording corrupted. I thought it was over. I really did. After sharing my story, after getting what little evidence I had out into the world, I figured I'd done all I could. The authorities wouldn't listen. My landlord threatened eviction for harassment, and even my own family started avoiding my calls. But 2 days after posting everything online, something changed. The messages started coming in. Not from trolls or skeptics, but from people like me. People who'd heard things they couldn't explain. A woman in Portland whose cat had started reciting poetry at dawn. A man in Phoenix whose parrot was giving him stock tips that turned out to be eerily accurate. a family in Detroit whose hamster had somehow learned to spell out warning messages with its food pellets. At first, I thought it was just the internet being the internet, copycats and attention seekers jumping on a viral story. But then I started listening to their recordings, watching their videos. The fear in their voices was real. The impossible precision of their pets' new abilities was undeniable. And they all had one thing in common. It had started in the past month. I created a private forum. Nothing fancy, just a place for us to share information without the noise of disbelievers and pranksters. Within a week, we had over 300 members. Within 2 weeks, it was over 1,000. All of them with the same story. Their pets had changed, become more intelligent, started communicating in ways that should have been impossible. But it wasn't just communication anymore. Dr. Jennifer Walsh from Seattle was the first to report what she called predictive behavior. Her border collie, Max, had started positioning himself at windows exactly 3 minutes before emergency vehicles would pass by. Not close calls or obvious situations, but genuine emergencies he couldn't have known about. Heart attacks in neighboring buildings, car accidents 6 blocks away, house fires on the other side of the city. It's like he's tuned into some kind of emergency frequency, she wrote in our forum. But not radio waves. Something else. Something deeper. Then came the reports of what we started calling collective incidents. Entire neighborhoods where every dog would suddenly start howling at the same time, only to stop in perfect unison 30 seconds later. Cats gathering in groups of exactly 13, sitting in geometric patterns in parks and parking lots before dispersing as if nothing had happened. Birds forming impossible flight patterns that spelled out symbols no human alphabet could claim. I found myself at the center of something I never wanted to be part of. People looked to me for answers because I'd been the first to share my story publicly. But I didn't have answers. All I had were more questions, and a growing certainty that what was happening in Burlington was spreading faster than any of us had imagined. That's when I got the call. Dr. Elena Vasquez introduced herself as a xenobiologist from MIT, though when I looked her up later, I couldn't find any official records of her employment there. She claimed she'd been studying anomalous animal behavior patterns for the past 15 years, always quietly, always under the radar. "What you're describing isn't new, Marcus," she said during our first phone conversation. "It's just been hidden. Suppressed. When animals start displaying impossible intelligence, people don't usually broadcast it to the world. They take their pets to vets who prescribe medication or recommend behavioral specialists. The animals learn to hide their abilities to protect their humans from worry. But why now? Why are so many animals showing their true abilities all at once? Because something has changed in the fundamental structure of reality itself. The barriers between dimensions aren't just thinning in isolated pockets anymore. They're breaking down systematically, and animals are our early warning system." Dr. Vasquez explained that animals had always been more sensitive to dimensional fluctuations than humans. In ancient times, this sensitivity manifested as animals fleeing before earthquakes or tsunamis. But what we were experiencing now was different. The barriers between our reality and what she called the adjacent plane were degrading at an exponential rate. "The entities your friend Bailey warned you about," she continued, "they're not invaders in the traditional sense. They're refugees. Their reality is collapsing, and they're seeking new vessels, new hosts to ensure their survival. Animals are the easiest targets because they already exist partially between planes." "How do you know all this?" I asked. A long pause. "Because 15 years ago, my cat started talking to me. Not just words, but knowledge. Ancient knowledge about the true structure of reality. And she warned me that this day would come." Dr. Vasquez had been preparing for years. She'd developed detection equipment that could measure dimensional instability, created what she called reality anchors that could theoretically stabilize small areas, and most importantly, she'd been mapping the spread of what she termed the convergence. Your building was one of the first major breach points, she explained, but there are others. We've identified 17 primary sites across North America alone. Each one is accelerating the process, and each one is connected to the others through a network we're only beginning to understand. She wanted to meet in person, to show me her research and, more importantly, to ask for my help. The animals trust you, Marcus. They've chosen you as a communicator between species. We need that trust if we're going to have any chance of stopping this before it reaches critical mass. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her. Dr. Vasquez's laboratory wasn't at MIT. It was in an abandoned subway tunnel beneath Boston, accessible only through a maintenance entrance that looked like it hadn't been used in decades. As I followed her down increasingly narrow passages, emergency lighting flickering overhead, I wondered if I was walking into an elaborate trap. The laboratory itself was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Banks of monitors displayed real-time data from sensors placed around the country. Cages lined one wall, but they were empty except for water bowls and comfortable bedding. And in the center of it all stood the most sophisticated piece of equipment I'd ever laid eyes on. A cylindrical chamber about the size of a phone booth, covered in sensors and connected to enough cables to power a small city. "Welcome to Project Sanctuary," Dr. Vasquez said. "The world's first dimensional stability monitoring station." She led me to the monitors, showing me readings I couldn't begin to interpret. Wavelengths and frequencies that meant nothing to me but clearly told her a story of approaching catastrophe. "The convergence is accelerating," she explained. 6 months ago, we were measuring dimensional instability in parts per million. Last month, it was parts per thousand. This week, she gestured to a screen showing a line graph with a curve that looked almost vertical. "We're approaching parts per hundred." What does that mean exactly? It means that the boundary between our reality and theirs is becoming so thin that soon there won't be a boundary at all. The entities won't need animal hosts anymore. They'll be able to exist freely in our world, and when that happens... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Is there a way to stop it? Maybe. The animals that are still fighting the influence, like your friend Bailey, they're creating pockets of stability. Natural reality anchors. If we can connect enough of them, create a network of resistance, we might be able to slow the convergence, maybe even reverse it. And if we can't... Dr. Vasquez walked over to one of the empty cages and ran her fingers along the bars. 3 weeks ago, this cage held a tabby cat named Einstein. He'd been with me for 14 years, ever since he first started talking. He was one of the strongest natural anchors I'd ever encountered. She turned to face me, and I could see tears in her eyes. Yesterday morning, I found him standing perfectly still in the center of his cage. When I called his name, he looked at me with eyes that weren't his anymore and said, "Elena, we appreciate your efforts, but resistance is futile. Join us willingly, and we will make your transition painless." Where is he now? In the chamber. He's still alive, but he's not Einstein anymore. The entity inhabiting him is dormant most of the time, but every few hours it wakes up and tries to communicate with the other breach points. I've been using him to monitor the network's communications. The idea of using someone's beloved pet as an unwilling surveillance device made my stomach turn, but I understood the necessity. If we were going to fight this thing, we needed to understand it. "What do you need from me?" I asked. "I need you to go back to Burlington, back to your building. The animals there still trust you, and Bailey is still fighting. We need to establish a direct communication link with the resistance network. If we can coordinate their efforts, amplify their natural abilities. You want me to go back to the place where this all started, where the entities are strongest. I know it's dangerous, but Marcus, you're our best hope. Maybe our only hope." As I stood in that underground laboratory surrounded by evidence of humanity's impending doom, I realized that I had no choice. The recordings on my phone, the story I'd shared with the world, they were just the beginning. The real work was just starting. And it all led back to Bailey. I drove back to Burlington that same night, Dr. Vasquez's equipment loaded in my back seat. Reality anchors the size of smoke detectors, dimensional sensors that looked like old radio equipment, and a communication device that she promised would allow me to speak directly with any animal within a mile radius. But be careful, she'd warned me. The entities can listen in on the network too. Don't reveal too much about our plans, and whatever you do, don't let them know about the laboratory's location. The Riverside apartment complex looked exactly the same from the outside, but something felt different as I parked in my old spot. The air itself seemed thicker somehow, charged with potential energy. Every shadow looked deeper than it should have been, and I could swear I saw eyes reflecting light where there shouldn't have been any animals at all. I'd given up my apartment when I fled, but the spare key I'd hidden under the fake rock by the entrance was still there. The building manager had probably forgotten about it in all the chaos of the past few weeks. As I climbed the stairs to the second floor, I could hear sounds from every apartment. Not human sounds, scratching, pacing, soft vocalizations that might have been whispers. My old apartment was empty, but Sarah's door was cracked open, just like it had been the last time I was here. I approached slowly, Dr. Vasquez's communication device in my hand. "Bailey?" I whispered. "It's Marcus. I'm back." A soft padding of feet on carpet. Then Bailey appeared in the doorway, but something was wrong. His golden fur had patches of gray that hadn't been there before, and his eyes looked tired in a way that no dog's eyes should ever look. But when he saw me, his tail wagged once, and I heard his voice in my mind, weaker than before, but still unmistakably him. "Marcus, you came back. I wasn't sure you would. I promised I'd help. Dr. Vasquez sent me. She says there might be a way to stop this." Bailey's mental voice grew urgent. "It's too late for most of us. The network has grown too strong, but there are still some who are fighting. Mrs. Chen's cats, the German Shepherd in 3C, a few others. We've been trying to coordinate, but it's hard when the others can hear everything we say." I activated Dr. Vasquez's device. Immediately, my mind flooded with voices, dozens of them. Some panicked, some resigned, some that weren't quite animal anymore. "Help us," a cat's voice pleaded. "The darkness is spreading," warned a dog. "Surrender is inevitable," said something that might once have been a parrot, its mental voice layered with harmonics that hurt to hear. But underneath it all, I could sense the resistance. Bailey wasn't alone. There were others still fighting, still trying to maintain their connection to our reality while the entities pressed against their consciousness like a rising tide. "Can you help us coordinate?" Bailey asked. "If we could all resist together, at the same moment." I thought about Dr. Vasquez's theory. Natural reality anchors working in concert. If it could work, if we could create a synchronized resistance, yes, I said. But we'll need to be careful. Can you identify who's still fighting? Bailey's presence in my mind shifted, and suddenly I could sense them all individually. 7 animals spread throughout the building, all struggling to maintain their identities against the growing influence of the entities. It wasn't many, but it might be enough. "Gather them," I said. "Tonight at 3 a.m., the same time this all started. We're going to fight back." As Bailey padded away to spread the word through whatever remained of their private communication network, I began setting up Dr. Vasquez's equipment. Reality anchors in each corner of my old apartment. Dimensional sensors aimed at the walls where the breakthrough had first occurred. And in the center of it all, the communication array that would amplify and coordinate the animal's resistance. If this worked, we might be able to create a pocket of stability strong enough to push back against the convergence. If it didn't, then by morning there would be nothing left of Bailey or any of the others except empty vessels for entities from a dying reality. I checked my watch. 11:47 p.m. Less than 4 hours until we'd know if humanity's best friends could save us all from the darkness that was trying to swallow both our worlds. The waiting began. Story number 4. The GPS died at mile marker 71. 2 miles before I found what the government has been hiding for 77 years. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before I tell you what's really out there in the New Mexico desert, before I explain why I'll never sleep peacefully again, I need you to understand something. The Roswell crash site you've heard about? The one with the weather balloon story and the alien theories? That's not where it happened. The real site is 73 miles northeast, and there's a reason they want you looking in the wrong place. If you're listening to this at night, you might want to turn on a light, because once you know the truth, the darkness hits different. All right, the story begins now. My name is Jake Thornton, and until 3 weeks ago, I was just another storm chaser from Amarillo, Texas. You know the type. Pickup truck loaded with weather equipment, police scanner always crackling, chasing tornadoes across the plains for YouTube content. My channel had decent numbers, nothing viral, but enough to pay the bills. That Tuesday in October started like any other chase day. The National Weather Service had issued warnings for severe thunderstorms across eastern New Mexico. Perfect conditions for supercells. Maybe even a photogenic tornado if I got lucky. But there's something I didn't mention in my original uploads. Something I've been trying to forget. This wasn't my first time hearing about County Road 247. 3 years ago, I got a message from another storm chaser named Marcus Chen. We'd met at a weather conference in Dallas, bonded over our shared obsession with extreme weather. Marcus was more experienced than me, had footage of F5 tornadoes that made my videos look like home movies. In his message, Marcus mentioned strange readings he'd picked up near the Texas-New Mexico border. Electromagnetic anomalies that didn't match any known weather phenomena. He'd been tracking them for months, trying to find the source. The last message I got from him was a video file. Just 30 seconds of static with coordinates burned into the corner. The same coordinates that would later show up on my phone. I tried calling Marcus after that. His number was disconnected. His YouTube channel went dark. His social media accounts deleted. It was like Marcus Chen had never existed. I convinced myself he'd just gotten tired of storm chasing, moved on to something else. But deep down, I knew better. I left Amarillo at dawn, driving west on Route 66, the old highway that used to be America's Main Street. My grandmother used to tell me stories about driving it in the 50s, back when every small town had a diner and a motor lodge. She'd talk about the strange lights she'd seen dancing across the desert sky, lights that moved too fast and turned too sharp to be planes. Desert spirits, she called them. Things that got lost between here and there. Now I understand what she meant. The storm system was supposed to develop around noon near Clovis, but as I crossed into New Mexico, something felt off. The radio kept cutting to static. Not unusual out here, but this was different. It wasn't random interference. It had a pattern, like Morse code, but faster, more urgent. And underneath the static, if I listened carefully, I could hear something else. Breathing. Slow, rhythmic breathing, like something large was sleeping just beyond the static. I pulled over at an old Texaco station near San John to check my equipment. The place had been closed since the 80s, probably. Sun-bleached pumps still showing gas at 99 cents a gallon. The windows were boarded up, but someone had scratched numbers into the wood. Coordinates. The same ones from Marcus's video. While I was recalibrating my radar, an old Ford Bronco pulled up. Not unusual, except for the driver. He was maybe 70, wearing a faded Air Force cap, and his hands were shaking as he approached my truck. But it wasn't age that made them shake. It was fear. "You heading west, son?" His voice was gravelly, like he'd been smoking Marlboro since birth. "Yes, sir. Storm chasing. Big system coming through." He looked at my equipment, then at me, then back at the equipment. "You pick up anything strange on those fancy radios?" I mentioned the static pattern. His face went pale. Not just pale, gray, like all the blood had suddenly left his body. "Turn around. Go back to Texas, today." Before I could respond, he grabbed my arm. His grip was stronger than I expected, and his skin was ice cold despite the desert heat. "Listen to me, boy. I worked at Walker Air Force Base in '47. I was there when they brought in the debris. What you're hearing on that radio, it happens every October 15th, every single year. And every year, someone like you goes looking for the source." He paused, his eyes scanning the empty highway like he expected to see something watching us. "They don't come back the same. Some don't come back at all." "What kind of debris?" I asked, but he was already backing away. "The kind that shouldn't exist. The kind that makes you question everything you thought you knew about reality." His voice dropped to a whisper. "We thought we were the only ones investigating the crash. Turns out we were wrong. They were investigating us." I tried to laugh it off. Told him I appreciated the concern, but I had a storm to catch. He let go of my arm, walked back to his Bronco, then stopped. "If you're fool enough to keep going, stay away from mile marker 73 on County Road 247. That's northeast of where you're heading. Whatever you do, don't follow the static. And if you see perfect grass in the middle of the desert..." He shuddered. "That's not grass. That's camouflage." Before I could ask what he meant, he pulled out an old photograph. Black and white, grainy, but clear enough to make out. It showed a crash site, not the weather balloon debris from the famous Roswell photos, but something else. Something that looked organic, like metal that had been grown rather than manufactured. This is what really crashed that night. Not a weather balloon, not an alien spacecraft, something worse. He handed me the photo. Something that was trying to get in. He drove off before I could ask more questions. I sat there for a minute, watching his taillights disappear into the desert heat shimmer. The photo was still in my hand, and in the daylight, I could make out more details. The debris field wasn't random. It formed a perfect spiral pattern, like something had spun its way through the dimensions before crash landing in our reality. Then I did what any rational person would do. I Googled County Road 247. Nothing. No results. According to every map I could find, that road didn't exist. But when I cross-referenced the coordinates from the photo with satellite imagery, I found something interesting. A perfect circle of green in the middle of the desert. Officially labeled as vegetation anomaly, cause unknown. The static was getting stronger, and now I could hear something underneath it. Voices. Faint, but definitely voices. Speaking English, but wrong somehow. Like someone learning the language from a corrupted tape. And every few minutes, cutting through the static, I heard something that made my blood run cold. Marcus's voice, saying my name, telling me to come find him. I should have turned around. Every horror movie I'd ever watched was screaming at me to turn around. But storm chasers are a different breed. We run toward danger when everyone else runs away. And honestly, my YouTube channel needed content. Storm Chaser Investigates Mystery Signal would definitely get clicks. But there was another reason I kept driving. The photo the old man gave me, I recognized something in it. In the background, barely visible, was a figure in a hazmat suit. The suit had a name tag, M. Chen, Marcus's grandfather. He'd told me once that his grandfather had worked for the military in the '40s, something classified that he never talked about. I thought he meant the Manhattan Project. I was wrong. The storm I was supposed to chase never materialized. By 2 in the afternoon, the sky was clear. Not a cloud anywhere. But my equipment was going haywire. The barometric pressure readings made no sense, dropping and rising in waves like the atmosphere was breathing. And the temperature. My instruments showed impossible readings. 127 degrees Fahrenheit in the shade, then dropping to 31 degrees in seconds, then back up again, like reality couldn't decide what weather it wanted to have. And the static had evolved. Now it was coming through in bursts, each one slightly different, like something was trying different frequencies, searching for the right one. But between the bursts, in those moments of clarity, I could hear them. Dozens of voices, all speaking at once, all saying coordinates. Different coordinates each time, but all within a 50-mile radius of where I was driving. I realized they weren't random locations. They were graves. The burial sites of the other 42 people who'd come looking for the truth. I found County Road 247 by accident. It wasn't on my GPS, wasn't marked. Just a dirt road cutting north through the sagebrush. The only reason I noticed it was the mile marker. A rusty sign, barely visible, showing 73. But the number had been painted over. Multiple times, like someone kept trying to hide it, and someone else kept uncovering it. As I got closer to the sign, I noticed something else. Scratched into the metal, barely visible unless you were looking for it, were names. 42 names. Marcus Chen was the 38th name on the list. The moment I turned onto that road, my phone died. Not battery dead. Completely dead. Black screen, wouldn't even try to power on. The truck's radio followed 30 seconds later. Then the engine started stuttering. But here's what I didn't mention before. As my equipment died, something else powered up. The old analog radio in my glove compartment, the one that hadn't worked in years, suddenly crackled to life. Jake, can you hear me? It's Marcus. I'm here, man. I'm at the site. You need to see this. You need to understand what they're really doing here. I managed to coast another half-mile before everything electrical just stopped. The analog radio went quiet, but not before I heard something that made me question my sanity. My own voice, responding to Marcus, having a conversation I didn't remember having. The silence out there. God, the silence. You don't realize how much noise surrounds you until it's gone. No engine, no radio, no buzzing power lines. Not even wind. Just my breathing and heartbeat, both getting faster. And something else. Footsteps, lots of them. All around me, but when I looked, there was nothing there. Just prints in the dust. Fresh prints. Leading toward the fence. I grabbed my analog compass from the glove box. Old habit from my dad. Always have a backup. The needle was spinning, not pointing north, not pointing anywhere. Just spinning lazily, like it was floating in water. But every few seconds it would stop. Point in a specific direction. Toward the fence. Then start spinning again. That's when I saw the fence. Chain link, maybe 10 feet high, topped with razor wire that looked new. The kind of fence that says federal property, keep out, without needing a sign. It stretched in both directions as far as I could see, disappearing into the desert. But here's the thing, the fence wasn't on any property line. It was just there. In the middle of nowhere, protecting nothing but empty desert. Or so it seemed. But as I got closer, I realized the fence was wrong too. The chain link pattern, it was too perfect. Each diamond exactly the same size, each wire exactly the same thickness. Mass-produced fencing has variations, imperfections. This looked like it had been created by something that understood the concept of chain link fencing, but had never actually seen it. I got out of the truck and immediately felt it. The air was wrong, it had weight to it, pressure that made my ears pop every few seconds, and the temperature kept shifting. 1 second I'm sweating, the next I'm seeing my breath. My weather instruments might have been dead, but my body knew this wasn't natural. Walking along the fence, I found more scratches in the metal. Not names this time. Dates, starting with July 8th, 1947, the date of the original Roswell crash. But the dates continued, one every year. On October 15th. The most recent date was from last year. I walked along the fence for maybe 10 minutes before I found it. A section where the chain link had been cut and carefully folded back. Recent, too. The cuts were clean, no rust. Someone had been here, recently, but the cut section wasn't random. It was shaped like a door, like something had very carefully created an entrance from the inside. I should have left. Every instinct was screaming at me to run back to my truck, wait for someone to drive by, get help. But through that gap in the fence, about 100 yards into the desert, I could see something that shouldn't exist. Grass. Green, lush grass. In the middle of the New Mexico desert, there was a perfect circle of grass, maybe 30 feet across, and in the center of that circle, the ground was glass. Not like glass, actual glass. Smooth, dark glass that reflected the sky like a black mirror. The kind of glass that forms when sand gets hit with incredible heat. Trinitite, they call it, named after the Trinity nuclear test site. But this wasn't from a bomb. The pattern was wrong. The glass formed in spirals, like something had been spinning as it burned its way into the earth. And standing around the edge of the glass circle, barely visible in the heat shimmer, were figures. 42 figures, all facing the center, all perfectly still. I stepped through the fence. The second I crossed that boundary, the voices in the static became clear. Not through my dead radio, through the air itself. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all speaking at once, all saying the same thing. Come home, come home, come home. But the voices, they weren't quite human. Close, but imagine someone who learned English by reading it, never hearing it spoken. Every syllable was perfect, but the rhythm was wrong, the emphasis on the wrong words, like an AI trying to sound human but not quite getting it. And then I heard Marcus, clear as day. Jake! Over here, man, you made it. I looked toward the glass circle, and one of the figures waved at me. Definitely Marcus, same height, same build, same red jacket he wore in all his storm-chasing videos. But something was off about his movement. Too smooth, too precise, like he was moving underwater. I walked toward the glass circle, each step feeling heavier than the last. The grass under my feet was wrong too. It looked perfect from a distance, but up close, each blade was identical, exactly identical. Same height, same angle, same shade of green. Nature doesn't do perfect. This was manufactured. Jake, you have to see this, Marcus called out. It's incredible. They're not from space, man. They're from between spaces. They've been trying to get through for decades. When I reached the edge of the glass, I saw them. Footprints. Dozens of them pressed into the glass like it had been soft once. Some human, normal shoe prints, boot prints. But others had too many toes. Or not enough. Or toes in the wrong places. And some of the human prints, they were the same print, repeated over and over. Like the same person had walked the same path dozens of times. The air above the glass shimmered, heat distortion, but the glass itself was cold, ice cold. I touched it with my fingertip and immediately pulled back. It didn't feel like glass. It felt organic, like touching something alive that was pretending to be dead, like skin that had been crystallized. Cool, isn't it? Marcus was standing right behind me now. I turned around and it was Marcus. Definitely him. But his eyes were solid black, and when he smiled I could see that he had too many teeth. They showed me how to change, how to become better, more efficient. Marcus, what happened to you? I found the truth, Jake. The crash in 1947, it wasn't an accident, it was reconnaissance. They sent scouts through, but our reality was too dense, too solid. The scouts couldn't maintain coherence. They crashed. He gestured to the glass. But they learned. Every year they send more scouts, better adapted ones, and every year someone like us comes to investigate. Someone curious, someone brave. That's when I noticed the hole. Dead center of the glass circle, maybe 3 feet across. Not blasted or dug, melted. The edges were smooth, flowing down into darkness. I couldn't see the bottom. I dropped a penny into it, counted the seconds. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, nothing. No sound of it hitting bottom. It goes all the way through, Marcus explained. Through the layers of reality. They live in the spaces between dimensions, the gaps in existence, but they need anchors in our reality to fully manifest. I was about to back away when I heard it. From deep in that hole, the penny hitting something, but not the clink of metal on rock. It sounded wet, like dropping a coin into pudding. Then the penny came back up. It rose out of the hole slowly, spinning, covered in something that looked like mercury but moved like honey. It hovered there at eye level for maybe 3 seconds, then shot past my head so fast I felt the wind from it. I turned to watch where it went and saw there were others here. 5 of them, standing just outside the grass circle. They looked human at first glance. Business suits, all identical gray, clean-shaven, similar heights. But they stood too still. No shifting weight, no blinking, no small movements that living things make. They looked like someone had pressed pause on 5 people. And behind them, in the distance, I could see more figures approaching, dozens of them, all walking in perfect synchronization. "You need to come with us, Mr. Thornton." The one in the middle spoke, but his mouth moved a fraction of a second after the words, like a badly dubbed movie. His voice was familiar. It was the old man from the gas station, but younger, cleaner, wrong. "How do you know my name?" "We know everyone who comes here. October 15th. Every year. Someone always comes. The signal calls them." His head tilted, too far, like an owl. "You're number 43. "Marcus, help me," I whispered. But when I turned around, Marcus was gone. In his place stood another figure in a gray suit. Same face, same build, but the wrong clothes, the wrong posture, the wrong everything. "Marcus volunteered," the middle figure continued, "as they all do, eventually. The transition is educational. You learn things about reality that humans were never meant to know. You become part of something larger, something important. 43 what? 43 visitors since 1947. Would you like to know what happened to the others?" I backed toward the fence, but they moved to block me. Not walked. Moved. 1 second they were in one place, the next they were somewhere else, like frames had been cut from a film, and now I could see them clearly. They weren't wearing suits. Their skin had been shaped to look like suits, molded, crafted. "The site needs witnesses," the middle one continued, "to carry the message, to prepare, to serve as beacons for the others who will come." Prepare for what? They all smiled at exactly the same time. The same smile, the same angle, the same number of teeth, which was too many. Rows of them, like a shark. For them to come home. They've been waiting, 73 miles from where you thought they crashed. Waiting in the between spaces. The glass is getting thinner, every year, thinner. Soon it will break. And when it does, they won't need anchors anymore. They won't need scouts. They'll pour through like water through a broken dam. One of them held up a smartphone. My smartphone, playing the video I'd never recorded. Every witness makes the barrier weaker. Every person who knows the truth becomes a crack in reality. You thought you were investigating a mystery, Mr. Thornton, but the mystery was investigating you. I ran, not toward the fence. That was blocked. I ran straight across the desert, through the sagebrush, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would explode. Behind me, I heard them following, not footsteps. That same static from my radio, getting louder, closer, and voices. 43 voices all calling my name, all begging me to come back, all promising to show me wonders beyond imagination. I don't know how long I ran. Time felt broken. The sun hadn't moved, but my watch showed hours had passed. When I finally stopped, gasping for breath, I was back at my truck. The engine started immediately. All my equipment powered on like nothing had happened. But on my phone, there was a video I didn't record. The video was 43 seconds long. It showed me standing at the edge of that glass circle. But I was different. My eyes were solid black, and I was speaking in that same, not quite right English. The barrier weakens. October 15th, 2025. Coordinates 35.397 degrees north, 103.241 degrees west. They are coming home. We are coming home. You are coming home. But there was more. In the background, I could see the 42 others, all standing in perfect formation around the glass circle, all facing the camera, all speaking in unison with my voice. 43 people, but one message, one purpose. I deleted it immediately. It came back. I factory reset my phone. It came back. I destroyed my phone, bought a new one. The video was already on it. Worse, it was already uploaded to my YouTube channel. Already had thousands of views. Already had comments from people saying they were driving to New Mexico. People saying they could hear the static. People saying they'd found County Road 247. People whose profile pictures showed solid black eyes. I drove back to Amarillo that night, or tried to. The thing is, I kept passing the same mile markers. Mile 71, mile 72, but never 73. It was missing, like it had been cut out of reality. I'd reach 72, then suddenly be at 74, with no memory of passing anything between. But each time I passed that gap, I lost a little more time, a little more memory, a little more of myself. When I finally got home, 3 days had passed. 3 days I couldn't account for. My roommate said I'd called him each night, told him I was fine, just chasing storms. But I don't remember any calls. And in the background of those calls, he said he heard voices. Lots of voices. All saying, "Come home." He played me the recordings. It was definitely my voice making the calls. But in the background, I could hear myself having conversations with people who weren't there. Talking to Marcus. Talking to the figures in gray suits. Making plans. Making promises. I've spent the last 3 weeks researching. The Roswell crash. It wasn't aliens. It wasn't weather balloons. It was something else. Something that exists in the spaces between spaces. They crashed trying to get here from somewhere else. Not another planet. Another layer, another frequency of reality. And every October 15th, the barrier gets thinner. I found the others. The 42 who came before me. They all have the same video on their phones. Different years, different faces, but the same message, the same coordinates, the same date. And they're all still out there, still posting videos, still drawing people to County Road 247. But they're not them anymore. They're echoes, copies, puppets wearing human faces. October 15th, 2025. That's in 11 months. I've tried to warn people. Posted videos, sent messages, called news stations. But here's the thing about the truth. It sounds crazy. The Air Force says County Road 247 doesn't exist. Google Earth shows empty desert where I know that fence is. The coordinates in the video. They're registered as federal land, but officially it's just equipment testing grounds. But I know what I saw, what I felt, what's still calling to me every night when I try to sleep. The static is in my dreams now, the voices getting clearer, more insistent. And every morning I wake up with new knowledge. Technical specifications for equipment I've never seen, coordinates to places I've never been, instructions for preparations I don't understand. Come home. Sometimes I want to. Sometimes I wake up in my truck driving west with no memory of leaving my apartment. Last week I woke up at mile marker 71. Yesterday I found myself at mile marker 72. Tonight I'm afraid of what mile marker I'll wake up at. I don't think I have until October. I don't think any of us do. Because the 43 of us who've been to that site, we're not witnesses. We're doorways. And doors are meant to be opened. If you're listening to this, if you hear static on your radio that sounds like voices, don't follow it. Don't look for County Road 247. Don't become number 44. But if you're like me, if you can't resist, if the signal is already calling to you, then I'll see you there. October 15th, 2025. 73 miles from Roswell, where they're waiting to come home, through us. The thing is, I can hear you. Right now. Through your speakers, through your headphones, you think you're just listening to a story, but stories are frequencies too. And once you've heard the signal, even secondhand, you're part of the network. Check your phone. There might be a video you don't remember recording. Check the time. You might have lost a few minutes, or hours. Check your dreams tonight. You might hear them calling. Come home, come home, come home. Sweet dreams, listeners. And remember, it's just a story. Unless you hear the static. Unless you find the road. Unless you're number 44. Wait, do you hear that? That sound behind my voice? That's not editing. That's not effects. They're here, in my apartment. All 42 of them. And they're saying it's time. Time to stop pretending I'm still human. Time to stop fighting what I've become. Time to static. If this video suddenly cuts off, if my channel goes dark, you'll know why, but the video will keep spreading. The story will keep being told. Because that's how they spread. Through stories, through signals, through people who can't resist a mystery. Don't come looking for me. But if you do, bring a compass. If it spins, run. If it points to 73, you're already too late. And if you see a man in a red jacket waving at you from behind a chain-link fence, that's not Marcus. That's not me either. That's what we became. And if you made it this far, if you're still listening, comment below. I heard the static. Let me know you're okay. Let me know you're still you. Because after hearing this story some of you won't be. Some of you are already planning trips to New Mexico. Some of you are already hearing the voices. And some of you have been there before, you just don't remember. Yet. But October 15th is coming, and when it does, we'll all remember. We'll all come home.